Prynhawn. Good afternoon. It's time for that video some of you have asked me to do. What are my thoughts on Welsh independence? I'm going to be a bit brutal and a bit honest. According to some polls, 1 in 3 people now support Welsh independence, or other polls, 1 in 4. Either way, this is a subtle increase from what it had been. So, what do I think about Welsh independence? Well, it's feasible in terms of, yes, you could. I mean, Luxembourg is tiny, they do it. Estonia, smaller population than Wales. Israel, about the same size as Wales. We're bigger than Jamaica. So size or ability to do so or sustain ourselves is not the issue that I have with Welsh independence. There's the linguistics thing. I don't want us to end up like Ireland where everybody just speaks English. That would be a nightmare for me, and why would I waste my time with that? I mean, I'm sorry, Ireland, and I'm sorry if that's quite brutal, but I mean, your history is much different to ours. So it's a different case for us. But these countries, these other countries that are about the size or same population as Wales, Estonia, Slovenia, Albania, Israel, Jamaica, all these countries have different politics, different histories, but there's one thing that threads them together in common as being small and independent states, is that they're politically mature enough to change the ruling party, but not just the ruling party. They're politically mature enough to change the ruling political ideology, as in sometimes a bit left, sometimes they'll go quite far right, centrist liberal, which I kind of would enjoy, center left or center right, liberal conservative. You get the idea. Depending upon the situation, they're politically and worldly astute enough to govern their countries responsibly, because no one party, or more importantly, no one political ideology can run a country all the time, or it will just destroy itself. And that's something that Wales lacks immensely. We have voted for one party since 1922, the Labour Party. In fact, we are the longest running country on earth in terms of choosing one party or having one party that's as dominant. No country even matches us. Longer than communist China. Yeah, sure, you have Westminster, but I mean in terms of Wales, in terms of our chosen politics. And that really bothers me in terms of the feasibility of Welsh independence. But it's a bit deeper, that rabbit hole, because the Welsh nationalist party, Plaid Cymru, I mean, there are a couple others, Brigo, rising up to the surface. They share the same ideology as the Labour Party. Centre-left, okay, a bit slightly off centre-left to left, believing in this universalist socialism leads to kind of a utopia, kind of idealism. And if Plaid Cymru were not of the same political ideology as Labour, I would say, okay, that makes sense, perhaps. But we have two big parties in Wales, but the only real difference between them is that one wants an independent Welsh state, and one wants the Union. One wants to achieve the universalist utopia through a Welsh state, the other wants to achieve the universalist utopia through the British Union. My opinion is, fair enough on Labour, if you're going to be universalist and utopian about it, it makes sense to do it through the larger state and to do it through the power of the Union. I mean, fair enough. If that's what you believe, we don't need a second party to achieve that. We already have the mechanisms of His Majesty's United Kingdom to do that. Where does this come from, this Labour Party, and why have we voted for one political party since 1922 and the Welsh National Party as an extension of that mindset, born in, I think it was 1924, I'll put it here if I'm wrong, of the same kind of faith idea that swept Wales at that time of socialistic beliefs. Why have we turned to that? The Labour tradition came into Wales as a foreign ideology that attacked the native culture. Now, I'm not saying that Labour is not indigenous to Wales now. I mean, it's been a long time. But during the time of Iolo Morgannwg, I mean, we're talking the early 1800s and industrialization. I mentioned this in a couple of my videos. You had Universalists, churches budding up, and this was due to the influence of people coming into those industries from England and opposing the native nonconformist groups. And that's how that came up. And they believed in this utopian universalism. And it's in the exact same places where those churches sprung up. And those English migrants, and to be fair, a lot of Welsh latched onto that, like Iolo Morgannwg himself. But it's those who, in those areas, took on this socialist faith. And it is a faith, in my opinion, because it arises out of a dialectic between an oppressor and an oppressed group, much in the same dynamic as sin relationships in Christianity. It creates a hierarchy of good and bad. And you see these banners at marches of the miners types. These reflect early Christian martyrs, martyr banners. What socialism is it's taken a lot of propagandistic imagery of early Christianity and repackaged it into a workers' struggle. And this has produced a new faith in Wales. To make my point going further is why that doesn't really make sense for Welsh independence. Let's go back over the faiths periods in Wales, so you get exactly what I'm talking about. So after Rome left, 383, going up into the 600s, up to 700, you have all these places called Llan, Llanrwst, Llandelo, Llanwrog, Llanelli. All these places come from these early saints, many of them, most of them, and establishing religious communities in this certain type of Christianity. But this changed. That was an age, the age of saints, or the age of Llan. This changed into another age. Gwynedd and Dyfed and Morgannwg, or Gwent, began to centralize authority, and they built ecclesiastical centers to take in all these Llan-like communities and unify them in their grip. So you had Llandaf, Tydddewi, Llandelo coming in for a bit, Bangor. You had these as centers of power, ecclesiastic power, and this age carried on this accruing centralizing force in Welsh kingship until Hwel came along. And in the middle of his reign, around 920-25, he's setting down these laws. It's like the high point of this age, and it begins ebbing into another one. The Normans come in 1081. As the Normans come in, this age was already ebbing out, but you have a bishop, Rhygyfarch ap Slien, and he puts forth the life of Dewi's son, the life of our Saint David, but Bernard coming in 1115 is really a foreign influence in our church. And this ushers in a new age because we're not just going to take this. A new order is coming in. There's different orders within the Catholic Church at this point. The Cistercians. And from the 1120s, really 1130s in the West, going up until 1284, the princes, especially the dynasty of Aberfrau, take this and use this as a political weapon because the decentralized nature of the Cistercians mean they can work around the influence of England holding on to the church. And that's an age of faith that's decentralizing. After conquest, we really do begin going into divinity cults like of the Mother Mary. It changes. There's a much more feminine element coming through in this 14th century. And we're building up a hierarchy of, from the peasantry up to the kings, looking through it in like a religious lens, a natural chain of being. And it's forming in our own way in this divinity age, which is, I guess it's what I call it. And at the high point, you have Glyndŵr, trying to enact that divine right, that Wales has a divine right to rule. And that revolution fails. And it just kind of ebbs out slowly. It's kind of we almost had this orgasmic moment, and then it just kind of flowed out unemotionally after that. The Reformation, the Protestant Reformation, hit Wales full on, even though there had been echoes toward the end of the last age, in 1535. And I'd say the high point really hit in 1588 with, well, we get a Bible, right? Full Bible in our own language. It's important. But this carries on, this Reformation, in subtle ways. The age doesn't really change for quite a while. But the British wars, the Civil Wars, the English Civil War, the wars in Scotland, the Irish Confederate Wars, all these together, the British Civil Wars, I have a video on that. This causes such an upheaval that the age it's not really an age, it's like the collision of ages. This printing is getting quite easy. You can spread ideas. Dissemination. And that dissemination really allows in 1639, Llanfaes, the first neilltuol, anghyffurfiol, kind of two different ways of saying nonconformist. The first of those kinds of church in Wales. But this is still, in a way, it's quite Anglican. It's not full-fledged nonconformity. And you have this all the way up until about 1750, in which there's these brewings, especially 1731 with Griffith Jones's circulating schools, spreading literacy. Hwyl Harris, his religious awakening and Methodism coming in. But it's not a dominant force yet. As the 1750s come in, we're entering the nonconformist age. And this is slowly going to birth liberalism. Or, well, rather Welsh liberalism. And some people say that David Lloyd George, being the Prime Minister of the British Empire at its height, would be the high point of this liberal age. But the liberal age was a consequence of being in the nonconformist age. And so the high point of the nonconformist age really is the birth of the Liberal Party as the dominant force in Wales, rather than the age itself. The nonconformity in Wales causes the Welsh Liberal Party. But bubbling under the surface, there are social tensions, especially around these areas where there's this Universalist church coming in. And these trade unions. And eventually, this comes to a head in the early 1900s when this new influence pronounces itself as a political party. A political party not based upon religious freedoms or individualist rights, or divine right, or national identity, but upon erasing differences, erasing national identity, erasing language, erasing even faith itself. That's how socialism came into Wales, as a force wanting to get rid of our uniqueness. Then 1922 hits and Labour wins across Wales, ushering in, really, a new age, one that we are still in. Each age has a high point. The high point of this Labour age was around 1997 to 1999 with Welsh devolution. So each age, each revolution creates its own end, eventually. And I think that's what we're seeing now. But it's going to be a long time. And about Welsh independence, Plaid Cymru has it all wrong. They're trying to use the revolutionary ideas which brought Labour to power and its ideological basis as the basis for a Welsh state. But those ideas are built on the presumption of unity without nations, basically. Those ideas are anti-nationalist, trying to tear down the institutions that exist in order to build new ones and then create some kind of thing. What you're saying actually is that you want a revolution, not that you want a Welsh state. Now, don't get me wrong, I mean, there are plenty of good people in Plaid Cymru. I just don't think that's a mature attitude. When I look around Welsh nationalism, I don't see the political maturity of a wide spectrum, and it makes me question, is there the practical nature at hand in Wales needed to set aside this faith spirit that comes along every age and just look at nationality in terms of, well, sometimes you need to be conservative, sometimes you need a bit of liberalism, sometimes you do need a bit of, oh, things are unfair, kind of, let's get a bit of the left. You know, you need that sometimes, but it's not like you can build a state on that. A nation is not one ideology. A nation is not sprouted from one party. Even the name, Plaid Cymru, the Party of Wales, it's so singular in terms of saying, we know what's best. I wonder if, because it came from that age in which socialism was replacing nonconformity, that the only way to establish a Welsh state is to look forward to the age coming which rebels against the last age. Because the high point of, I know people are going to disagree with me, but like Blairism, that was the high point of this age. That was the high point of civic nationalism, universalism, saying that we're all the same. That was the height that, not Tony Blair himself, no, but that era, you know, that's what it led to. We're on the way out of that. We're going into something else. I don't know what it is. What do you think it is? Let me know. But what I do think, Plaid Cymru likes to say that it's in opposition to the status quo, but it's saying the status quo in Westminster. It's not saying the status quo in Wales, which healthy nations, Israel, Slovenia, Estonia, that are our size, they're mature enough to rebel against their own ideas and their own Zeitgeist, the spirit of the age. And if you're voting for one party for over 100 years, that's center left and holding on to that social justice kind of thing, and then your answer to that is, let's vote in another center left party holding on to that with a slight variation saying that we should form a state, I don't think that that's enough to justify an independent Wales. Sorry, it seems a bit childish to me. Can Wales be independent? Of course. But you have to show that you're willing to be liberal or conservative some of the time. If you're just going to govern indefinitely as one party rule left wing, I don't really see the point, because that just leads to failure. And I think the priority rather should be getting in a government which is not of this same working class struggle idea into power. After that, okay, we can discuss independence, but first, the age has to change, the spirit has to change, the faith itself of the times that has been the same since 1922 has to change. Otherwise, I don't really see the point of an independent state. What is it going to be built on? We all have to be good comrades. That we all are the same and we all get along. No, we're not all the same. We don't all get along. I'm sorry if that's brutal, but what this country needs is not a constitutional change. It needs a change of spirit. We've had 100 years without a deep change here. Until you change that, there's no point in Welsh independence, because it's going to fail miserably if you attempt it before you change yourselves.